You've spent 6 months planning your career move. You've created detailed spreadsheets, analyzed every possible outcome, researched every company, and mapped out every contingency. You've written a 20-page strategy document, consulted with mentors, and refined your approach until it's bulletproof. In that moment, you feel prepared, strategic, ready. But here's the devastating truth nobody tells you. You're not planning for success, you're planning for paralysis. Every day you spend strategizing instead of acting. Every plan you refine before testing. Every strategy you perfect before executing is making you weaker. You're not being strategic, you're being stuck. And over-planning is the fastest path to powerlessness. Today we're going to explore the uncompromising truth about planning, why it destroys power, and how to transform from someone who plans endlessly into someone who executes strategically. The modern world has made planning seem like intelligence. We're told to think before we act, to plan before we move, to strategize before we commit. Business schools teach comprehensive planning. Self-help gurus celebrate those who never act without a plan. We've been conditioned to believe that planning equals wisdom, that strategy equals competence, that waiting for the perfect plan equals intelligence. But this is a trap. In a world where execution beats planning, where action beats analysis, where movement beats strategy, the person who plans endlessly is the person who never moves. They become predictable, stagnant, and ultimately powerless. Consider this scenario. Person A spends months planning their business launch, creating detailed business plans, analyzing every market condition, and waiting for the perfect strategy. Person B launches with a basic plan, tests in the market, learns from results, and adapts based on what actually works. Who do you think gains more power? Who learns faster? Who builds momentum? The person who plans endlessly or the person who executes strategically? Niccolo Machiavelli understood this dynamic when he wrote, "The wise man does at once what the fool does finally." In our modern context, this means the strategically intelligent individual acts quickly and adapts, while the overplanner delays and loses opportunities. When you plan endlessly, you're teaching the world that you're afraid to act. When you execute strategically, you're teaching them that you're powerful enough to adapt. The first law of strategic execution is what I call action over analysis, the deliberate practice of moving before you have the perfect plan, testing before you're certain, and executing before you've strategized everything. This isn't recklessness or impulsiveness, it's strategic positioning. When you plan endlessly, you're operating from fear. When you act strategically, you're operating from power. Think about the last time you delayed a decision because you needed more information, more analysis, more planning. You wanted to research one more angle, consider one more option, perfect one more detail. In that moment, you felt like you were being thorough, but you were actually being paralyzed. But what if, instead of planning endlessly, you acted? What if you tested your strategy in the real world, learned from actual results, and adapted based on what works? What if you became the person who moves quickly and adapts rather than the person who plans endlessly and never executes? Machiavelli captured this perfectly. It is better to be feared than loved, if you cannot be both. In the context of execution, this means it's better to be known for taking action and delivering results than for being thorough and never moving. The person who plans endlessly is weak regardless of their intelligence or resources. The person who executes strategically is powerful because they cannot be paralyzed through the fear of imperfection. In the digital age, this principle becomes even more critical. Every day you spend planning your social media strategy, your business launch, your career move, is a day your competitors are gaining ground. The person who acts quickly, tests in the market, and adapts based on feedback gains momentum, while the overplanner is still strategizing. Meanwhile, the strategically active individual remains powerful precisely because they're not waiting. They don't plan before acting. They don't analyze endlessly before testing. They don't wait for perfect strategies before executing. This isn't impulsiveness, it's strategic movement. The second principle of strategic execution is learning through doing. the uncompromising practice of gaining knowledge through action rather than analysis. This requires understanding that in a world of constant change, the ability to adapt quickly beats the ability to plan perfectly. Most people plan because they believe thoroughness equals competence. They think that analyzing every angle, planning every detail, and strategizing every contingency will guarantee success. But this is backwards. True power comes from the ability to act quickly, learn from results, and adapt based on what actually works, not what you think should work. Consider two entrepreneurs starting businesses. Entrepreneur A spends a year planning their business, creating comprehensive strategies, analyzing every market condition, and perfecting their approach before launching. Entrepreneur B launches with a basic plan in 1 month, tests it with real customers, and adapts based on actual feedback. Who do you think learns faster? Who adapts better? Who gains more power? The person who plans before launching, or the person who learns through execution? Machiavelli understood this when he observed, "Since love and fear can hardly exist together, if we must choose between them, it is far safer to be feared than loved." In modern terms, this means it's better to be respected for your ability to execute and deliver results than admired for your thorough planning. The person who can be paralyzed by the need for perfect plans is weak regardless of their intelligence. The person who executes strategically is powerful because they cannot be stopped by analysis paralysis. In professional settings, this means not waiting for perfect strategies before making decisions, not analyzing endlessly before taking action, and not planning every detail before launching projects. The person who plans endlessly becomes the person everyone waits on. The person whose projects never launch. The person who's always strategizing but never executing. The person who executes strategically becomes the person who delivers results, who gains momentum, who builds power through action. The third law of strategic execution is momentum over perfection, the ruthless prioritization of movement over planning, of results over strategy, of action over analysis. This requires answering a simple but profound question. Am I planning to avoid failure, or am I executing to achieve results? Most people plan because they're afraid of making mistakes, looking unprepared, or facing uncertainty. They believe that if they can create the perfect plan, they can avoid the discomfort of uncertainty. But this is backwards. True power comes from the ability to act with imperfect information, learn from mistakes, and improve through iteration. The strategically intelligent individual understands that overplanning is often procrastination in disguise. They're willing to act before they're ready, to test before they're certain, to move before they've planned everything, even when it's uncomfortable in the short term, because they understand that long-term power comes from execution, not planning. This isn't about becoming impulsive or abandoning strategy. It's about becoming intentional. It's about recognizing that your ability to execute quickly and adapt beats your ability to plan perfectly. When you prioritize execution over planning, you gain the power to move fast, to learn quickly, and to build momentum. You become unpredictable to those who would compete with you through thoroughness, and you become unstoppable in pursuit of your objectives. In negotiations, this means making decisions quickly rather than analyzing endlessly. In leadership, this means taking action and adapting rather than planning perfectly. In your field, this means launching and iterating rather than planning before you start. The person who can execute strategically, who can act quickly and adapt, who can prioritize movement over planning, this person commands respect and wields real power. Machiavelli wrote, "Men judge generally more by the eye than by the hand, because it belongs to everybody to see you, to few to come in touch with you." In our modern context, this means people will judge you by your results, by what you've actually accomplished, by the momentum you've built, not by how perfectly you planned or how thoroughly you strategized. When you plan endlessly, you reveal that you're afraid to act. When you execute strategically, you project power. The ultimate goal of strategic execution isn't to become impulsive or abandon strategy. It's to master the art of acting quickly, and adapting based on results. It's to reach a state where your ability to execute beats your competitor's ability to plan, where your speed creates opportunities others miss, and where your momentum builds power that over-planning can never achieve. This doesn't mean becoming reckless or abandoning planning entirely. It means developing what I call strategic movement, the ability to act quickly while maintaining the discipline to adapt and improve. When you act before you have the perfect plan, you gain real-world feedback that planning can never provide. When you test before you're certain, you learn what actually works rather than what should work. When you move before you've strategized everything, you build momentum that over-planning destroys. The unmovable force understands that true power isn't the ability to plan perfectly. It's the ability to execute strategically. It's the ability to act quickly while others plan, to learn through doing while others analyze, to build momentum while others strategize. In our hyper-connected, constantly changing world, this kind of strategic execution is revolutionary. While others are planning, analyzing, and strategizing, you operate from a place of strategic movement and iterative power. The principles I've shared today aren't about becoming impulsive or abandoning strategy. They're about reclaiming your power in a world designed to make you plan. They're about trading the temporary comfort of thoroughness for the lasting strength of execution. In the digital age, where everyone is planning, analyzing, and strategizing, the person who operates differently becomes magnetic. The person who executes quickly, who learns through action, who builds momentum through movement, this person stands out like a beacon in a sea of overplanners. The choice is yours. Continue planning endlessly, analyzing thoroughly, and forever strategizing for a move that never comes. Or develop the strategic intelligence to execute quickly, learn through action, and become truly powerful. As Machiavelli understood centuries ago, and as our planning-obsessed culture has made more relevant than ever, true power lies not in planning perfectly, but in executing strategically. The less you plan, the more you execute. The more you act, the more power you gain. The more you move, the more momentum you build. The path to power through strategic execution is uncompromising because it requires you to resist every instinct our planning-obsessed culture has programmed into you. But for those disciplined enough to act quickly and adapt rather than plan endlessly, it offers something invaluable: the ability to move fast, to learn quickly, and the kind of power that comes not from perfect planning, but from strategic execution.